This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. So Carly Taylor knocks one in from midfield and scores a hat trick, and the U.S. women's team, of course, grabs the FIFA title before what I believe was the largest television audience in history for this kind of event. And in general, we can enjoy those moments and say thanks to great athletes. Unfortunately, so much of this is happening, particularly in that sport, and in worldwide sports and Olympic sports, against a background of scandal based on corruption. And the corruption includes allegations of bribery, money laundering, nepotism, who knows what else, as people are resigning and people are being dragged away in handcuffs and so on. Well, an old friend of ours, a good friend of ours, Dr. Wilbour Kelsick, whose business card says that he's a chiropractor, is in fact a lot more than that. He has been working with elite athletes around the world for a great many years on many levels, and just got back from his second visit to Greece just like yesterday. He believes, at least he's told me this, that corruption at the highest level of international sports is actually a commonplace, and he's wondered why it took so long to show up. Wilbour, first of all, how long were you in Greece?
I was there for 16 days.
So, did you bring traveler's checks? Did you bring cash? Do you carry drachmas with you? I mean, what did you do to eat?
Well, had euros.
You had euros and?
And credit card, which I found that I couldn't use, because most of the businesses wouldn't take credit cards anymore.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that part I didn't know.
Yes, and they would say, well, our credit card machine is not working today.
Oh, yeah, that's the standard answer, yeah.
Which is, I mean, you know, in Greece, a lot of things is cash, and I mean, that's maybe an underlying issue, which has been going on for quite a while. So we had cash, and some places took credit card, but most places didn't. So we had to survive on cash. But, you know, our meals were provided for us and paid for.
But what we're seeing on television news are people lined up at the ATMs and crying because there's no money. So you didn't have to use an ATM.
No, I didn't have to use an ATM. And I think one of the... You would never say that Greece was going through a crisis till about, I think, maybe last Monday. The restaurants were full, and I'm talking about the restaurants in the local areas. I'm not talking about in the downtown core, the center, the city center. I'm talking about like in Laundering, which is a local area for all the local people that go to restaurants. These restaurants were full, and I think the government, the Greek government, have a cash problem. I don't know if the Greek people necessarily have as much of a cash problem, because the malls are filled with people shopping and doing stuff. Well, that's what I see. I mean, I was there for a while.
It's very hard to get a clear picture of the news from the news.
Well, it is, and I keep asking my colleagues, I says, is this a crisis? What's going on? Because we go out at night to restaurants, and the alleyways are filled with people drinking and having, and they're not tourists.
They're the locals.
They're locals.
Well, next week I'm going to have a guest on who will talk about the world economy and what anybody, if anybody has $20 to invest, what they should do with it these days. So, Wilbour, you and I had a long, wonderful coffee just a few weeks ago during one of your many comings and goings from somewhere else. And we were talking about how, you know, in some countries, corruption is just another way of saying business. It's just, that's part of what we do as business. It's the cost of doing business and so on. And how big corporations often, that's just written into the program. Oh yeah, well, we'll have a $200 million fine for that one. Canada seems to be one of the more benign countries, and yet we ourselves are filled with corruption. But talk about corruption in sport. You've been involved in sport at the highest levels for a great many years now.
Well, yes, I mean, and one of the areas, I mean, which most people think doesn't involve corruption, you know, does in fact have a lot of corruption in it. And in terms of track and field, if you see one of the big scandals that happened about 5-6 years ago, the Belco scandal with drugs being siphoned into competitions and athletes getting things, injections from very high sophisticated labs and so forth.
Yes.
And it all goes back into the whole concept of winning at any cost, and athletes at times, I guess, don't take charge, don't take control of their destiny and are being persuaded by, agents or people who are obviously making money off them and to persuade them to get into these situations to win, and an athlete is more than two legs, and from what I see, some management companies don't consider an athlete as an individual, the human factor, I call it.
Yes.
They just look at an athlete, well, two legs, somebody running, making money, and I mean, that's one of the reasons I think people go to that extent to win at any cost. And some of them have been caught many times.
So these two legs are 19-year-old kids often, and they're just blessed with some strange talent. They can run faster, jump higher, and so on. But then there's all these lights, and there's all this fame, and then girls are throwing themselves at the man and vice versa or whatever. There's all these opportunities, and it's very easy to corrupt and dazzle a youngster.
Well, it's very easy, and if the athlete doesn't have the correct direction and leadership from the coaches who sometimes they look up to, that creates a huge problem. I mean, in Canada, we try to keep a very good sort of control in terms of what our athletes take. We have the Canadian Centre for Sport that really looks at and make sure that the medications that they take are not tainted or vitamins and so forth, and they have to get permission and they're tested, and there's a regular testing that goes on, which kind of sort of catch the cheaters once in a while. But some other countries don't. Some other countries, they bypass things. I mean, if you're looking at, I don't want to name countries, but there are ways of getting around the
We'll
things.
get to the countries in a second, but let's stay with that athlete for a moment. I mean, how do you say to a young man or woman who comes from an impoverished background and comes from an impoverished community? This is, I think, the problem that the National Football League and the NBA and other major league sports encounters over and over again. And suddenly this kid is being given a $2 million contract or a $20 million contract. And how do you say to this kid, have good judgment, cool your heels? How do you say that?
Well, you don't just have to say it.
Yes.
I think you have to have
You have to live it. You have to be it.
You have to be it, and you have to have the organization in place and the support team around the athlete. And that's one of the things I think these athletes get away with. There's not that support team, and sometimes you become just an athlete and a coach and a manager. And what is the support team? How consistent is the medical support around them in terms of the doctors, the physiotherapists, the chiropractors, the massage? Is there an integrative approach to the care, and is everybody talking to each other to ensure that the athlete is getting the best care? A lot of time that's removed, and you don't have that sort of support, and so the athlete is left with their coach, and things can go haywire there. You see, and there are organized teams too that still have problems. I mean, you see it in cycling,
Absolutely.
right? In cycling, there was, there was a hierarchy of stuff. But I'm saying if you have a really good organized team and you have credible people on the team, the chances is that there will be accountability. And if there's accountability, the chances of things happening is much less.
Last thing about the athletes themselves, then I want to go to talking about the behind the scenes, because I think that's where the real corruption and scandal stories happen. But we just had an ugly incident at Wimbledon. Nick Kyrgios, who's plays for Australia. He's from Australia. Completely dogged it in the middle of a match. Suddenly he wasn't playing very well, and the other guy was beating him, and he mailed it in. He made no effort. And at his press conference afterwards, he shrugged his shoulders and said, "So what?" I mean, if I were the boss of tennis, whatever that is, the tennis federation, I'd say, "You're a bum. You're finished. You're out of here. You're not allowed to play. We don't tolerate that."
Yeah, but again, these things don't just stop at that point, because again, there's a pressure from management. It seems that sport it's a kind of a devil's advocate sort of. It's a yin and yang sort of situation too.
Yes.
That, the management companies, they're the one making the money. They put in the advertisements. They have all of this stuff. So the associations get pressure from these people. You can't just do that.
Mark McCormick, the founder of IMG, really changed the face of worldwide sports 40 years ago when he, as a 24-year-old, got married up with Arnold Palmer and turned Arnold into Arnie. And the world changed. And IMG is the biggest sports management company in the world today. They own tournaments.
Well, they do.
Yes.
You need them at the same point, but I think there has to be a certain amount of accountability and control, and looking at the athlete as a person, the human factor has to be taken into consideration. And I think a lot of times that's not taken, and then the finance and the economics kind of take over the fact that sports is just sports. It's a means of not just fame, but it also is a community and a cultural aspect to it that help to bring calm, to bring pride and to your nation and to your community and to your parents, and that has to be taken into consideration.
Well, on the one hand, you have first tee in golf, where we get kids engaged in golf not only for playing golf but for human values, and on the other hand, we now have umpteen golf tournaments telling Donald Trump to get lost and moving their tournaments from Trump locations to other golf courses because of his idiotic comments about Mexican immigrants.
Yes. Yes. I mean, and you're going to see those political sort of ramifications based on the foundation that sports sometimes is built on. And I think every time the economic situation shadows the real emphasis of what sports is supposed to mean, brings a lot of what we call interference of other things.
So now let's go behind the scenes. We're going to take a break in a moment, and we'll spend a lot of time on this after the break. But just to get into it quickly, that's the sport, but that's the show. But behind the curtain are all these machinations of very clever people playing with lots and lots of money. We're talking the many millions of dollars, the billions of dollars. Putin is going to spend $20 billion on infrastructure for what? For the next, is it soccer match? Or
soccer,
the next,
for the next.
And Sochi, I'm told, is now a pile of weeds.
Yeah, yes, it is. Yes, and this is kind of ironic because there was some documents just released in terms of looking and comparing Olympics in different cities and the devastation that happened because of Montreal.
Yes.
That's what happened, and it took them 33 decades to sort of pay off Montreal, and most cities now are refusing actually and saying, you know what, we can't afford to have these games because it's becoming more of an economic stress than actually the beauty of what.
And what's your take on the take home for the Vancouver 2010 Olympics? It's my impression is, although I wasn't a big fan of it and I wasn't excited like lots of people were, my impression is that we did not badly.
Well, we did fairly well.
We did
very well. I mean, I've been to many Olympic Games, and I think Vancouver put on an excellent show.
Yes, but what's the payoff now that we're a couple of years down the road?
Well, I think there's some legacies left with the games.
Yes.
I think in terms of sport, I think in terms of the winter sport, which is something that Canada is trying to develop. I mean, in terms of snowboarding and aerial skiing and all of these.
But we weren't left. We didn't leave ourselves with a ton of empty ski slides or ski jumps or a ton of useless luge runs or something.
No, we didn't. I mean, the center at Whistler, I think, will in the long run really help to develop the sport of bobsled and so forth. And I think it's a very, very proficient track. You should go ride it.
Are you going to head the Dominica bobsled team?
Well, I don't think I could afford to. I wish I could help them have a bobsled team like the Jamaicans did. I mean, in the bobsled is about sprinting, and you have to learn to drive. It's a skill that we can teach anybody, you know. Right. So
I'd be very good at the yelling part.
Would you?
Just screaming down.
Have you ever been in a bobsled?
No.
I've been in many bobsleds.
Oh my goodness! And you're here to talk about.
Oh yes, it's quite an art to ride a bobsled.
I bet. Yes. We're going to take a little break, Wilbour, and we're going to come right back, and we're going to talk about some of the skullduggery that not only has been going on a few weeks ago, before FIFA even started, but is in the news the last 2 days, including today. Quick break, a chance for you to send a note to davidberner.com. Always happy to hear from you. And for our lovely sponsors who are happy to support this program here on Shaw Community Television, Cable 4. Back in a moment.
This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works.
A man named Harold Maine Nichols, probably pronounced, because this is a report from the Telegraph in London, Harold Maine Nichols. He's been charged with 46 different things, among other things, helping to organize an event in Qatar. Qatar is a country with the population of Greater Vancouver, and yet it's going to host a multi-million-dollar sports event. But he had these little wrinkles in helping to organize it. Could my nephew and my cousin have a job, please? Where did he miss the point that that's not allowed? Here's a report from just a few weeks ago out of Bern, Switzerland, a city named after me. Banks in Switzerland have reported 53 possible acts of money laundering in the investigation of FIFA's 2018 and 2022 World Cup bidding contests, right? Our guest is Wilbour Kelsick, Dr. Wilbour Kelsick, who is, I don't know, your card just says that you're you're a chiropractor, but you do about 90 other things.
Well, I'm a sports chiropractor. I mean, I do a lot of sort of musculoskeletal diagnosis and management of sports injuries.
Yeah.
That's my specialty in rehab medicine and sports medicine.
Yeah, we'll go back to this scandal issue, but just quickly, I know of late, for some years now, in your work and in your office out in Coquitlam area, you've been very big on this whole business of fascia. What is it?
Well, fascia, yes,
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
The fascia has always been around because that's what it's found in our body and
Yes,
it's always
it's part
been
of the
there.
body, yes.
It's part of the body. We call it the Cinderella tissue, and
Why?
Why? Because it was sort of forgotten, you know. In the old days, the fascia tissue was taken out because the anatomists wanted to look at good muscles, the nice shiny muscles, nice shiny organ, and all of this white stuff that was around. They said, oh, this is not important tissue. It's inert. It doesn't have any function. So we'll just take it out and we will, you know, we just look at the muscles, and everything was focused on the muscle tissue because the muscles look nice and red and so forth. And of late, we've been finding out, well, no, this is absolutely an important connective tissue that is very important for our body life and our function.
Yes.
In terms of even the function of muscles. The fascia is found in all the muscles, intertwined. It's like a net.
So how do you bring that into the conversation when you're helping an athlete rehab, or just a Sunday tennis player like I am who gets tennis elbow or bad shoulder or whatever?
Well, from what we know about fascia now, it helps us to understand, number one, a lot of injuries. That we know that injuries now are not just occurring in just muscle tissue, but are more in the tendinous and the ligamentous tissue, which are inundated with fascia.
Yeah.
And that helps us also in terms of training. How do we train athletes? Because you have to in training fascial tissue, it's different than the way you just train muscles. So that's important.
Really?
Yes. And we also know now that muscles do not do these big contracting things that we think they do.
What do they do?
They move very little, actually.
Oh.
And the fascial tissues are in there as a tension tissue that sort of keeps everything and transmit the force from one point to the next. So, the old thing was that the muscle goes from your biceps, your bicep muscle goes from the elbow here to the shoulder. We know that's not the case, We know that the muscles are connected all the way. And yet your whole body is connected. And the reason why you have this fascia is to redistribute the forces in your body for tension. So when you're going to hit the tennis or you're going to, make a stroke, that all the muscles in your leg and into your torso are all connected, and they get the messages and tense things up so that you can make that stroke. It has nothing to just do with your elbow.
Now, I know you were recently in Edinburgh, among other places, but I don't think you said you had a chance to talk to Rory. So what's he supposed to do with this ankle of his? He's going to miss the Scottish Open, and then the Open, the big one, comes up 16 days later or something. Without examining him, do you have a faintest idea if he can make it?
I think the most important thing is to find out the causes of the injury, which is usually what it is for sports injury. We want to know the cause. Is it a mere fact of weakness? Is it some kind of eccentric weakness in the joint? Is it coming from the hip? Usually an ankle injury, sometimes the ankle maybe have not very much to do with it.
It has nothing to do with it.
It's not the primary cause. It's just a secondary area of weakness.
Well, he got this playing soccer. We don't know if he tripped or someone kicked him or something. But we do know from watching his golf swing that this is a guy whose entire body is engaged in the golf swing.
Yes.
And the hips and everything else are like flying in rotation.
Yeah. Well, I haven't examined the athlete, but I think his management team, his medical management team need to look and find the cause. And usually they can rehab these things, and having a good rehab strategy and plan is the way to go.
I hope ego and money
should be ready.
I hope ego and money don't put him back on the course too early.
But that's the problem. Most athletes go back way too early without having proper rehab and being patient in terms of rehabilitation.
So this scandal, the FIFA scandal, is going on. We thought when what's his name, Sepp, the big boss, when Sepp retired, when he walked away, Sepp Blatter, when he stepped down, we thought, well, that's something. And when 15 or 8 guys or something were arrested, well, that's something. But this is going on, and we have countries that are playing fast and loose. And when a country that has a lot of money wants an event, a FIFA or an Olympics or something, how much money is going under the table? How much are we taking the representative out for dinner? How much are we getting the representative prostitutes? How much are we giving people drugs and so on?
There's a lot of money that goes, I think, under the table. There's a lot of, it's just coming up. We're just topping the tip of the iceberg, I think, in terms of all of this FIFA.
Yes.
And I think the IOC, all of these organizations, there's a lot of corruption and favoring and all of these things. And that's the problem with sport now, is that it's got so big, there's so much money involved, that it takes away from the true, really social aspect of what sports is supposed to mean.
Can we go back? We can't, golfers who win a tournament once every 4 years are multimillionaires because there's so much money in the sport.
I think we can, I don't know how much back we can go, in the sense that we need the publicity, and I think because it helps, there's a positive part to it, that more people can view it, more people can get interested in the sport. But I think there can be a balance. I think it's about accountability, and I think they have to change the way that they do things. I think this old boys club sort of, I rub your back, you rub my back sort of thing, this has to stop. And I think it takes the game and it takes away from the essence and turns a lot of people away from the sport.
And there is a certain pattern, a certain sheen that goes with big international sporting events, isn't there?
Oh, there is.
I mean, the way the announcer carries on about Augusta National, like it's close
but
to
it's a prestige thing.
Yes.
All right. I mean, and you know what? This is fine to make a sports, high level, to make it prestige. But again, can we put back the human factor into it? Remove the corruption so that it's fair, so that you don't have people cheating and you don't have people trying to get in under the table and their friends doing things.
My son was an elite athlete and he was offered drugs regularly, which thank God he turned down. You've been involved in sport for years. Have you been offered all kinds of baksheesh? Have you been offered all kinds of goodies?
Well, I haven't been offered. I mean, I've been.
What kind of schlep are you? Why haven't you been?
People have come and says, try this and try this.
Yes.
This is going to help you, help your athletes, because they know I'm involved with high-level athletes.
Yes.
So I've had many requests. People, you want to try this or you want to try that? Yeah, but the thing is that we have, I know for the Canadian team, and that's why I really enjoy working with the Canadian, we have very rigorous standards. And
Good.
because we work as a team, and if I think there's any salesperson coming with a substance and say, yes, we want to try this, if I think there's any merit to it, because I do my research, I first of all have to pass it through my medical team and pass it to the people who are the experts in dealing with that. And then we make a decision whether it's good for athletes or not. I do not ever take on my own and say, under the table, you do this because I want you to be better than B to be better than A. That's totally irresponsible. And I can speak for a lot of my colleagues. I know that we don't do that.
Wilbour, we're God. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was great. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Dr. Wilbour Kelsick. We are out of here except to tell you that next week, my old friend Adrian Mastracci from KCM Wealth Management, he's a portfolio manager, will come and see if he can help doomcuffs like me understand the story of Greece and world markets. Thanks for being with us here at Shaw Community Television, Cable 4. Good night.
Thank you.
That was great.